Welcome everybody to Bible Bites. I'm Pastor Dan. We are reading through the Bible one small bite at a time. Particularly, we've been going through the book of Matthew. And we are going to begin in verse 9 today. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth and said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. Most of us, we read this and we think there had to have been something that would have precipitated Matthew's just abandoning his position at the tax booth and then just following Jesus. We can't imagine doing that today. And it is very well possible that Matthew may have at least had some interactions with Jesus or heard about Jesus. But either way, what we see is a extreme obedience, right? Matthew is willing to give up everything to go and follow Jesus. Not many would do this. And so it's significant that we do not make light of the fact that Matthew rose up in that moment and went and followed Jesus. Matthew is also called Levi in the Bible, in the scriptures. So that might add clarification if you read the name Levi in other places. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. So I should note that tax collectors were considered rascals, scoundrels. Certainly they were not popular people in Jesus' day. They were considered liar, cheaters. You can get the idea of how they were viewed in society in Jesus' day. And so, here they're lumped in with sinners. In verse 11, and when the Pharisees saw this, again, this is religious leaders, they said to Jesus' disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" So the religious leaders were a pious group of people, and they would not hang out with sinners and tax collectors. There was a great distinction between the two. They felt as though they were above hanging out, I guess, with sinners and tax collectors, though, of course, they themselves were sinners. But there was a distinction there. One was religious, one was irreligious. The Pharisees' religiosity was not going to get them to God, but neither was the tax collectors and sinners' irreligiosity. So when Jesus heard it, when he heard what the Pharisees, the religious leaders, were saying to the disciples, Jesus said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." So a couple things going on here. First, Jesus was identifying why he was hanging out with sinners and tax collectors. Because they were sin sick. They needed to see the righteousness of God, not the pseudo-righteousness of the religious leaders, or the pseudo-righteousness of religious law that they had always seen all their life, that they had grown up with, right? But they needed true healing, true forgiveness, true reconciliation with God. They needed that relationship with God, and it was only going to come through Jesus, through the healing that he could give. And then Jesus reveals what I would call like the pseudo-righteousness of the religious leaders. Because he says, go and learn what this means. And often in the scriptures, handfuls of times, we see God calling Israel out on this very thing, saying that, listen, you do all the religious actions. You worship me in ways that I don't particularly care about anymore because you don't do these things. You don't desire mercy. And so Jesus is calling them to do what God really wants, the worship that he really wants, the righteousness that really matters, which is to love others, to show mercy, right? To take care of the oppressed. And part of that would be hanging out maybe with tax collectors and sinners who need healing, who need God's forgiveness. And that's what Jesus says, for I came not to call the righteous, but I'm here for sinners, for those who need healing. Now, when he says I've come not to call the righteous, Jesus is actually referring to those who look to God, who have a relationship with God. He hasn't come for them, and the reason he hasn't come for them is because they are already with God. They are part of God's kingdom. But Jesus has come to call sinners, right, to the kingdom. All right. Hopefully, this is a good word that blesses you today. And I look forward to reading with you more in our next Bible Bite video. See you then.